Laredo, Texas, July 14, 1988. At 21:40 hours, a man calling himself Roberto Salazar boards the overnight train to Mexico City. He chooses a first-class sleeper, not for comfort, but for protection. Moving targets are harder to reach. Borders blur. Witnesses disappear. But Salazar is not a businessman. He is Carlos Menendez, a senior Cuban intelligence officer. And by 04:25 hours, his heart will stop on a train rolling through the high desert near Querétaro. No struggle, no alarm, no suspects. This is the story of how safety became exposure. Operation Night Passage. Carlos Menendez was born in Havana in 1946, the year before the Cold War formally began. His childhood ended at 13 when Fidel Castro's revolution transformed Cuba. The young Menendez watched his father, a mid-level customs official, purged for insufficient revolutionary enthusiasm. The lesson imprinted immediately: visibility kills, invisibility protects. By age 22, Menendez had joined the Dirección General de Inteligencia during its most paranoid expansion period. Soviet advisors taught tradecraft to hundreds of new recruits. Menendez excelled not at recruitment or interrogation, but at something more fundamental: logistics. He understood how information moved, where it crossed borders, how to make a handoff look like coincidence. His specialty became courier management. Intelligence services call this the arterial system of espionage. Brilliant analysts mean nothing if their product never reaches decision makers. Menendez built networks that functioned like clockwork. Documents moved from Havana to Nicaragua to Mexico City to sympathetic contacts in Los Angeles, all without creating patterns surveillance could detect. Associates described him as methodical, never impulsive. He traveled under rotating identities, never flying when trains existed, never staying in one location more than 36 hours. Cuban. Intelligence reports from this period show zero compromises in routes Menendez managed. Zero. This operational invisibility made him strategically invaluable. By the late 1980s, he coordinated all Cuban intelligence transit through Mexico, the critical node between Havana, Central America, and networks operating inside the United States. Mexico's doctrine of non-alignment gave Cuban operatives breathing room that vanished in countries aligned with Washington. Menendez exploited that ambiguity with surgical precision. What made him dangerous was not the secrets he personally knew. It was how reliably he moved everyone else's secrets across a continent. The CIA had tracked Menendez intermittently since 1983. The problem was simple. He never stopped moving long enough to act against. Surveillance teams would identify him in Guadalajara, and by the time authorization came through, he would be in Veracruz or already back in Havana. Arrest risked exposing sources. Extradition from Mexico was impossible given diplomatic realities. The man was untouchable precisely because he refused to stay put. But by 1988, U.S. intelligence doctrine in Latin America had shifted fundamentally. The strategy planners called transit interdiction logic. The concept was straightforward. Eliminating couriers collapses networks faster than recruiting double agents or intercepting communications. Cut the arteries, the body dies. Menendez represented the perfect test case. Signals intelligence confirmed he was carrying a consolidated network ledger northbound in July, a document containing courier identities, safe houses, and communication protocols across 3 countries. The intelligence value was immense, but the operational challenge seemed insurmountable. The obstacles were concrete. First, Mexican sovereignty meant any action on Mexican soil required absolute deniability. Second, Menendez's constant movement meant no fixed point of attack. Third, His training meant he would detect traditional surveillance. Fourth, any public failure would destroy U.S.-Mexico intelligence cooperation for years. Despite these challenges, planners identified one vulnerability. Menendez always took overnight trains, never flights. Trains offered him perceived advantages: compartmentalized spaces, transient witnesses, border crossings during sleep hours. He believed movement equaled protection. CIA analysts saw the opposite. A train is not open space. It is a closed system moving on predetermined tracks at predetermined speeds. Entry points are controlled. Exit points are known. Passenger manifests exist. The infrastructure itself becomes the weapon. The authorization came in late June 1988. The operation would be logged internally as NX-742. The team called it Night Passage. Within 3 weeks, all elements would be in position. But first, the human element needed resolution. The operative selected for primary execution was a woman the files identify only as Asset Alpha. She had conducted 2 previous operations in Latin America, both involving close quarters access under civilian cover. Her psychological evaluation noted what handlers termed acceptable compartmentalization, the ability to perform lethal actions while maintaining emotional distance. But during the final briefing in Houston, Alpha experienced what the after-action report describes as mission conflict anxiety. The target was not a battlefield enemy. Menendez had never personally harmed Americans. His crime was competence in service of an adversarial ideology. Alpha asked the question that haunts all covert operators: where is the line between strategic necessity and murder? Her handler's response appears in the declassified debrief. The line is wherever we draw it. Today, we draw it on that train. Alpha accepted the mission. Years later, in testimony before a closed congressional committee, she would describe that moment as the death of part of herself. But the mission continued. Intercepted communications from July 10th revealed Menendez discussing his daughter's upcoming quinceañera. He promised to bring her a gift from Mexico City, something special she had requested. Analysts noted nothing operationally relevant. The detail was filed away. When Menendez's heart stopped 4 days later, the gift was still in his briefcase, wrapped and ready. The daughter would never receive it. Intelligence services do not make exceptions for personal plans. By July 12th, the operation entered its execution phase. Signals intelligence confirmed Menendez had booked the overnight train from Laredo to Mexico City, departing July 14th. The window was 38 hours. The infrastructure assembled across 3 cities with no single element traceable to the others. In Houston, a document specialist created a complete marital history for assets Alpha and Bravo: wedding photos, joint bank accounts, credit card statements showing a 6-month relationship. The legend was not designed for deep investigation, only surface credibility. Train staff would see honeymooners, nothing more. In San Antonio, technical support prepared what operational files describe as a medical intervention package. Specification code MI-73. The equipment weighed less than 8 ounces. It would leave no chemical signature detectable by standard autopsy procedures available in 1980s Mexico. The technical manual specified a 4 to 6 minute exposure window. Longer risked detection. Shorter risked incomplete effect. In Laredo, a logistics coordinator secured 4 first-class tickets on the same train Menendez would board. The tickets were purchased through different travel agencies using different credit cards, creating no pattern. Compartment assignments appeared random, but had been specifically requested through a compromised rail official. Communication protocols relied on pre-timed actions, not live contact. Each operative knew their synchronization points: 22:10 hours, 03:40 hours, 04:25 hours. If any element failed, the entire operation collapsed. There would be no radio calls, no emergency signals. Silence was structure. The team structure maintained absolute compartmentalization. Assets Alpha and Bravo knew only their own role: access and execution. Asset Charlie, operating as an American archaeologist traveling second class, provided counter-surveillance using recording equipment disguised as research tools. Asset Delta, embedded as a rail safety consultant through the compromised logistics official, ensured crew distraction at critical moments. Each operative understood only their segment of the larger plan. If captured, they could compromise only themselves. The architecture protected itself through ignorance. The planning consumed 19 days. By July 13th, all operatives were in Laredo. Alpha and Bravo had 27 hours before boarding. July 13th, 1988. 1,500 hours. Alpha and Bravo checked into a hotel 3 blocks from the train station. They behaved exactly as honeymooners would. Held hands in the lobby, laughed too loudly at dinner, displayed the unconscious physical ease of new marriage. The performance was not for cameras, but for memory. Witnesses remember behavior, not faces. Asset Charlie arrived separately at 17:30 hours, carrying academic credentials from UC Berkeley and letters of introduction to Mexican archaeological sites. The cover was functional, not deep. Mexican authorities would see an American professor, slightly disheveled, talking too enthusiastically about pre-Columbian civilizations. Unremarkable. Asset Delta had been in Laredo for 3 days, conducting what appeared to be routine safety inspections on cross-border rail equipment. Railway officials knew him as thorough and slightly tedious. On July 13th, he filed a report noting minor ventilation irregularities in Dining Car 3. The report recommended staff monitor the situation during the next overnight run. This detail would become critical. Over the next 18 hours, surveillance teams confirmed Menendez's location in Laredo. He was staying at a different hotel under the Salazar identity, eating alone, reviewing paperwork in his room. His behavior matched his operational profile: solitary, cautious, methodical. By 2000 hours on July 14th, all elements were converging on the train station. What Menendez didn't know was that his compartment had been selected 6 days earlier. The architecture of the train car placed him in a specific geometry. Asset Alpha and Bravo in the adjacent compartment. A connecting door designed for families traveling together. The lock mechanism on these interior doors was standardized across the Mexican rail system. Delta had provided specifications. The breach time would be under 15 seconds. July 14th, 21:10 hours. Boarding began. Menendez entered first-class car 3, compartment 7. He carried 1 briefcase and 1 small suitcase. A porter helped with luggage. Menendez tipped exactly 15%, the amount recommended in travel guides. He was a man who followed protocols. 12 minutes later, Alpha and Bravo boarded. They were animated, touching constantly, whispering. The porter remembered them in later questioning as very much in love. They entered compartment 6, directly adjacent to Menendez. Asset Charlie boarded the second-class section at 21:32 hours, claiming a seat that provided sight lines to both the first-class corridor and the dining car entrance. His recording equipment appeared to be playing audio from archaeological lectures. It was actually monitoring radio frequencies used by Mexican federal police. Asset Delta did not board. His role was complete. By 21:40 hours, he was already across the border in Nuevo Laredo, beginning a leisurely drive toward Monterrey that would place him 200 miles from the train when events unfolded. The train departed Laredo at 21:53 hours, 7 minutes ahead of schedule. The early departure was coincidental, but operatives are trained to adapt to chaos. All timing calculations shifted forward 7 minutes. 2300 hours. The train crossed into Mexico. Border formalities were minimal for first-class passengers. A Mexican customs official glanced at passports, stamped documents, moved on. Menendez presented his Salazar passport. The official noted nothing unusual. Alpha and Bravo invited Menendez to join them for a drink in the dining car. He declined politely, citing fatigue. This was expected. Menendez never socialized with strangers while operational. The invitation served only to establish that the honeymooners had attempted friendly contact, a detail that would appear in witness statements. By midnight, most first-class passengers had retired to their compartments. Menendez turned off his light at 00:23 hours. Surveillance through the corridor window showed no further movement. The train was rolling through Nuevo León at 90 kilometers per hour, on schedule to reach Querétaro by 0500 hours. 0100 hours. Asset Charlie confirmed that Mexican federal police frequencies showed no unusual activity. The train was not under any external surveillance. This was the first critical confirmation. Alpha and Bravo remained in their compartment, lights on, voices occasionally audible. To any passing crew member, they were awake and talking, exactly as honeymooners might be. 0210 hours. First synchronization point. A scheduled conductor check began in car 3. This was routine, not a complication. The conductor verified tickets, checked that compartment doors were secure, moved efficiently through the car. He knocked on compartment 6. Bravo answered, disheveled and smiling. Everything appeared normal. The conductor moved on. The check confirmed crew patterns. The next scheduled round would not occur until 0600 hours, well after the window closed. 0312 hours. An unscheduled complication emerged. A different conductor appeared in car 3, responding to the dining car ventilation report Delta had filed. The conductor needed to inspect air handling systems, which required accessing the corridor and potentially entering compartments. Asset Delta's fabricated report now served its purpose. The second conductor was directed to dining car 3, where he spent 18 minutes examining ventilation ducts and documenting findings. By 0330 hours, he had completed his inspection and returned to crew quarters. The corridor was clear. The window had stabilized. 0358 hours. Asset Charlie confirmed through his monitoring equipment that corridor surveillance systems remained inactive. The train's older rolling stock included cameras only in dining and observation cars, not sleeping sections. This was an expected vulnerability, confirmed during planning. The execution window opened as the train entered the high desert plateau outside Querétaro. Population density dropped to near zero. The next station stop was 47 minutes away. Intervention, if anything went wrong, would be impossible. There would be no second chance. 0423 hours. Alpha stood in the corridor, breathing slowly, using the technique handlers called operational centering. Her hands were steady. Bravo was positioned behind the connecting door, tools ready. The door between compartments 6 and 7 was not designed for security, only privacy. The locking mechanism was a simple sliding bolt accessible from both sides with the right leverage. Charlie maintained position in second class, monitoring frequencies. If Mexican authorities received any alert, he would know within seconds. His instructions were absolute. If police were notified, he would pull the emergency brake. The chaos would allow Alpha and Bravo to abort and blend into passenger confusion. The signal was silence. No emergency brake meant proceed. 0 for 24 hours. Bravo applied pressure to the connecting door mechanism. The bolt slid free in 11 seconds, 3 seconds faster than practiced. The door opened inward, into Menendez's compartment. 0 for 25 hours. Entry was made. Menendez was asleep, lying on his right side, breathing evenly. The compartment was dark except for ambient light from the corridor window. His briefcase sat on the floor, the wrapped gift visible on top. Alpha moved to the bedside. The medical intervention package was already prepared. The method exploited a cardiac vulnerability that would mimic acute coronary failure, leaving no visible trauma and no chemical markers detectable by standard autopsy, procedures available in regional Mexican facilities. The delivery mechanism required direct contact with the carotid artery for 4 minutes minimum. Menendez's eyes opened at 3 minutes, 41 seconds. There was no time for him to process what was happening. No time to cry out. His body convulsed once. His breathing stopped at 4 minutes, 18 seconds. Cardiac arrest occurred at 4 minutes, 27 seconds. Total exposure time inside the compartment, 4 minutes, 12 seconds. Alpha checked for pulse. None. She checked pupils, fixed and dilated. The effect was complete. 0 for 29 hours. Bravo reset the compartment. Briefcase repositioned exactly as it had been, bedding smoothed, connecting door lock re-engaged. They left no fingerprints because they had worn gloves that appeared to be normal evening wear. They left no DNA because they had not touched anything with exposed skin. By 0 for 31 hours, both operatives had returned to compartment 6. The operation was complete. 0600 hours. The scheduled conductor check began. The conductor knocked on compartment 7. No response. He knocked again, louder. Still nothing. Using his master key, he opened the door. Menendez was in bed, apparently asleep. The conductor called his name. No response. The conductor approached and realized the passenger was not breathing. 0608 hours. The conductor notified the train supervisor. The supervisor confirmed death and ordered the body left undisturbed until reaching Buenavista Station. 0650 hours. The train reached Mexico City. Mexican Federal Police and Emergency Medical Services met the train. Menendez was pronounced dead at 0704 hours. Cause of death was listed preliminarily as acute cardiac event, pending investigation. Passengers in Car 3 were interviewed. Alpha and Bravo described hearing nothing unusual during the night. They appeared shocked and concerned, the appropriate, emotional response from honeymooners confronted with sudden death nearby. Investigators noted nothing suspicious. Asset Charlie disembarked with other second-class passengers, never questioned. By 0900 hours, he was on a bus to Oaxaca, maintaining his archaeological cover. Alpha and Bravo remained in Mexico City for 3 days, behaving as tourists, visiting museums, taking photographs. Their later border crossing into Texas triggered no flags. 2 honeymooners returning home, slightly subdued after an unsettling experience on the train. Asset Delta was in Monterrey when he learned of Menendez's death through news reports. His recorded reaction to colleagues was appropriate surprise. He continued his safety inspection tour for another week before returning to the United States. The medical intervention package was never recovered because it no longer existed in physical form. Components had been separated and disposed of at different locations during the train journey. No evidence remained. By 0900 hours, Mexican authorities understood a Cuban national traveling under false documentation had died on a train. The death appeared natural. The false identity suggested intelligence involvement. But in Mexico City's pragmatic view, foreign spies dying of heart attacks created no diplomatic complications. No autopsy was ordered. The body was prepared for return to Cuba. The death certificate read, "Acute cardiac event, consistent with pre-existing coronary disease." Menendez had no history of heart problems. But medical records can be incomplete, especially for intelligence officers operating under false names. Every investigative lead ended in dead ends. The honeymooners had checked out of their Mexico City hotel and disappeared into normal life. The archaeologist had continued to Oaxaca, exactly as his itinerary indicated. The rail safety consultant had been nowhere near the train. Passenger manifests showed only tourists and business people, all with credible documentation. The denials were transparent to those in the intelligence field. But transparency wasn't the point. Mexico officially recorded a death from natural causes. Unofficially, intelligence services understood what had occurred. The sophistication suggested American involvement, but proving it was impossible and diplomatically undesirable. Cuba issued no public statement. Privately, the Dirección General de Inteligencia went into crisis mode. If Menendez could be reached on a train, nowhere was safe. Couriers across 3 countries were recalled. Routes that had functioned for years were abandoned overnight. The consolidated network ledger Menendez had been carrying was recovered by Mexican authorities and, through channels that remained classified, provided to CIA analysts. The intelligence value was substantial. 47 courier identities, 19 safe houses, communication protocols for operations in Mexico, Guatemala, and Nicaragua. But the strategic impact went beyond the ledger. Cuban intelligence abandoned rail transit entirely after July 1988. Couriers shifted to flying, which increased their visibility and vulnerability. Network coordination became slower and less reliable. The arterial system Menendez had built collapsed. CIA analysts assessed the operation as achieving complete denial without attribution. The cost was equally clear, a precedent that movement itself could be weaponized. Other intelligence services studied NX-742 as a case study in closed system targeting. Within 2 years, similar operations were attempted on trains in Eastern Europe, though most failed due to inadequate preparation. For the individuals directly involved, consequences varied. Assets Alpha and Bravo left operational work within 18 months. Alpha's congressional testimony years later included a single striking observation. "We proved that a moving train is not sanctuary. But we also proved that our hands could kill someone who had never personally threatened us. I'm not sure which lesson was more important." Asset Charlie continued intelligence work until retirement in 2003. Asset Delta died in a car accident in 1991, unrelated to any operational activity. The operations classification level remained top secret until partial declassification in 2018. Even now, specific technical details and operative identities remain redacted. Mexican authorities were never officially informed of U.S. involvement. The diplomatic ambiguity was intentional and remains intact. Carlos Menendez's daughter never learned how her father died. The official story was a heart attack on a train, tragic but not suspicious. The gift he was bringing her, whatever it was, disappeared into evidence storage. Bureaucracies do not make exceptions for personal gestures. The CIA's internal assessment concluded that night passage represented optimal execution of transit, interdiction doctrine. The operation achieved strategic objectives while maintaining plausible deniability. Recommendations included adapting the methodology to other closed system environments. Buses, aircraft, ships. Was Carlos Menendez a dedicated intelligence officer serving his country's interests, or an enemy combatant in an undeclared war? The answer depends entirely on where you stand. From one perspective, Menendez enabled Cuban intelligence operations that undermined American interests across Latin America. His courier network supported regimes the United States considered hostile. His elimination prevented years of potential damage. The operation was strategic necessity, executed with precision and minimal collateral impact. From another perspective, Menendez was killed on foreign soil without trial, without due process, without even the acknowledgement that his death was anything other than natural. No law authorized his killing. No oversight reviewed the decision. He was murdered because he was effective at a job his government asked him to do. Both perspectives contain truth. This is the fundamental paradox of covert operations. They exist in spaces where law is suggestion and morality is negotiable. We grant intelligence agencies the authority to operate in these spaces because we believe the alternative, allowing adversaries to act unopposed, is worse. But if intelligence agencies can end a life without leaving a trace, who decides when that power is justified? Not courts, not legislatures, not the public. The decision occurs in classified briefings with no minutes, approved by officials whose names we will never know, executed by operatives who return to normal life carrying the weight of what they have done. Night passage worked because a man believed movement would protect him. The operation proved that movement could be transformed into vulnerability, that the very act of seeking safety could become exposure. The train that should have carried Menendez to another successful transit became the most controlled space imaginable. This is the legacy. Not just that intelligence services can kill on moving trains, but that we have decided this capability is acceptable if conducted with sufficient care and secrecy. The operation set no precedent because precedent requires acknowledgement. Instead, it created a template, studied and refined, existing in the gap between what nations claim to do and what they actually do. The answer reveals more about your worldview than about Menendez. Some will see justified elimination of a strategic threat. Others will see extrajudicial execution hidden behind bureaucratic language. Both are correct. What's your take? If a government can prove someone represents a genuine threat but cannot prosecute them legally, does that justify covert action? Or does the inability to prosecute mean the threat wasn't genuine enough to justify killing? Drop your perspective in the comments. If this story made you question the invisible machinery of intelligence warfare, hit that like button and share. These operations continue, refined and adapted, in closed systems we travel through every day. The trains still run on time. Most passengers reach their destinations safely. But now you understand. Sometimes the greatest danger is not the journey, but the belief that movement equals escape.